Hi there, I'm Guy from Midwinter Minis, and this is the 2020 Patreon Q&A. December, end of year. Is this going to be an annual thing? Maybe, who knows. There are a lot of questions here, over 100. I won't be able to put timestamps for all the individual questions, but what I will be able to do is kind of categorize them. So if you're interested in a particular topic, you can just jump to that section, or you can just relax and watch the whole thing while you paint something. The choice is yours. Okay, let's do it. Any tips for starting to make mini painting videos? Edit. Just edit away all of your mistakes. Try and be as concise as you can with the information you deliver, and as punchy and to the point in your delivery of that information as you can be. Also, I think honesty. You just really have to be absolutely upfront and honest about your abilities, what you're trying to achieve, and what you hope the viewer is going to get from the video. People can see straight through you if you're not being honest. It turns me off as a viewer straight away if, you can see someone doesn't believe in what they're doing or isn't interested in what they're doing. Slice away all the stuff that's unnecessary. Be totally brutal, because you can be guaranteed that if you find something a little bit boring, or if you think the flow of the video is starting to kind of wane a little bit, 100% sure the viewer has already switched off by then. What made you choose jumping into YouTube at the time you did? Honestly, I was just quite overworked in my day job at the synth company, and Midwinter Minis at the time had started doing quite well in terms of views. This is maybe in February or March 2020. And I just joined the YouTube partner program, so I was receiving AdSense money, and it was enough for me to cover the basics. I just thought, this opportunity doesn't come along very often, so if you don't take it, yeah, you're an idiot. So I just did, and yeah, I couldn't be happier. How much cold, hard, stinking cash are you making from the channel, and are you a billionaire yet? Not a billionaire yet, not a millionaire, nothing close. The honest answer is, it varies a lot. So the worst months at the very start of this year were about $1,000 a month. More recently, been getting up to around about $6,000 a month, which is, a very good amount of money. You do have to take the rough with the smooth in terms of Google ads. You don't really get much control over it, and some videos that you think will do well just don't. The thing that actually makes this truly viable as a career is the fact that there are patrons who are willing to give you like $2 to $5 or whatever dollars a month to make the content you're making, and just to show a bit of appreciation. And that basically covers my bills and covers my sort of day-to-day living expenses, which is absolutely amazing. A large portion of the money I actually make from YouTube directly gets reinvested back into the channel in lots of boring ways. So having that Patreon safety net, it's a sort of big weight off your mind. What microphone and video editing software do I use? I use the Sontronics Podcast Pro at the moment for my voice. In the past, I've actually used an Audix i5, which is an instrument microphone really, but it kind of suits my voice. So that is what I used. I've sort of developed a preference for dynamic microphones over condenser microphones. I just prefer the way they sound for voiceovers, and this one sounds pretty good, I think. And the room I'm in has minimal treatment. I've got a few little foam high-frequency diffusers and absorbers in, but they do very little if I'm being honest. It just sounds pretty good straight out the box. In terms of the software, I use Magic's Vegas. It feels the most similar to a traditional digital audio workstation in terms of workflow, and that is what I'm definitely used to, and that is why I still use it rather than something like Premiere. What would your teenage self think of you doing what you're doing now? That's a little bit of a tricky one, because in the back of my mind I still feel like teenage me, but I definitely wouldn't believe that I was essentially painting toys and playing games for a living, for people's entertainment on the internet and being seen by a huge audience. I still don't believe it, but here we are. What inspired you to leave your former career in the music industry to drop knowledge on the 40k community via YouTube? Aside from kind of burning myself out with doing a huge amount of work for both of those things at the same time, and then finally having to choose between one or the other, the thing that really drew me towards Warhammer specifically at the moment was the community. I thought the community was just really, for me, kind of positive and welcoming. I realized for a lot of people that's not the case, and I apologize on behalf of the people that make you feel like that is not the case. But if you think the Warhammer community has its negative side, which it does, you definitely need to experience the music community, because there is an awful lot of negativity in that community. Of course, there are incredibly lovely people in that community as well. But yeah, it really struck me the positive difference that the sort of miniature painting community had compared to the quite prominent negativity in the music online community. What project are you most proud of? It's got to be the Sandstone Necrons, to be honest. It was my first video on the channel, and it really set the tone and the pace of the things that I was going to do after that. It just blows my mind when I go on Reddit, or even if I go on eBay and I see Necrons painted in the style I kind of made up 2 years ago there and available to buy, or that people are showing off in their cool kind of new armies that they've made. And I also meet people in real life who have started Sandstone Necron armies. Crazy, absolutely crazy. I'm pretty proud of that. Have you ever watched a video from one of your YouTube friends and thought, why didn't I think of that? Yeah, all the time. All the time. I've got a list of about 85 video ideas that I want to do, and I do quite often have to go through and remove the ones where other people have got there first, but you know, that's fine. I don't have the time or ability to do everything as well as I like to do, so having other people there kind of putting that out is fine with me. I feel like my friends on other channels are kind of part of the same team. That might sound really corny, but I don't feel there's kind of a competition there. We're all very supportive of each other. We want each other to do well. We want the hobby to do well. It's quite a supportive place. So if it's not top secret, a brief intro into the economics of YouTubing, Patreoning. I think it definitely helped that I started monetizing the channel at the right time, pretty much just before the pandemic started and everyone was kind of housebound and looking for ways to pass their time. I've already kind of mentioned the sort of low end and high end of monthly earnings in a previous question, but at the moment I'm probably making the equivalent of someone who works in a managerial position at a bank, which, don't get me wrong, I think is crazy considering I make, paint and play with toys on the internet, but I'm not earning, you know, life-changing megabucks. This is sustaining what I'm able to do, and I do have to buy things in to actually make stuff for the channel, and I do have to reinvest in it. So I haven't exactly figured out yet how much I have made purely from Midwinter Minis so far. It's probably quite a bit less than you'd expect, because I've only been doing it as a full-time job and earning from it since sort of March, April this year. And I'm really glad that it's sustaining me and that I can also contribute to the household as well as Penny. So thank you so much for watching and being involved. How long do you spend editing and filming a single video? Surprisingly long. The actual painting process itself doesn't take very long, but it takes a little while to set up the shot and to kind of get everything in focus and to get used to the position that I'm painting in, because I don't think there's any other channel that shoots like I do, where I have basically the camera right in front of my face, working here with the camera there. It's really uncomfortable to do, but I find it gets the best results, and I'm very used to doing it now, so it's a hard habit to break out of. In terms of timescale, it depends on the sort of ambition of the video and whether or not it's kind of a simple painting tutorial or something more in depth. You might be surprised to know that the Blackstone Fortress videos, for example, didn't take very long, because most of them I did while I was also working full time, so it was maybe a couple of evenings of work, maybe 3 evenings, so maybe 12 hours total. Videos like our battle reports obviously take sort of a couple of hours to set up, 3 or 4 hours to actually shoot, and then realistically there's probably about 20 hours of work in the actual video editing, purely the editing side of it, because there is so much to do. There's literally about 500 cuts to reduce everything down to a watchable size, or watchable for my attention span. And videos like the Why is Warhammer So Popular and the kind of unboxings, a lot more has to go into them. There's a lot of kind of B-roll, which is that, you know, not necessarily the thing I'm talking about, but if I'm talking about something that's kind of nebulous, you need to show something on screen. It can't just be the logo or the, you know, the box art or something. It is definitely a full-time job. Sometimes, depending on what video, it's more than a full-time job. And I definitely have done several 12, 13, 14-hour days in a row to get a video out on a specific day. Now that you do this full time, do you ever feel burned out? I don't. I've got a very strange behavioral thing towards stuff that I enjoy doing, and I just lock onto it and I do it for hours and hours and hours. Whether that's, you know, miniature painting, playing video games, or creating music, I can do it for a full day and not feel like I'm burning myself out. The thing that is quite difficult though is to come up with ideas that are both fun for me to do and won't burn me out, but also interesting for people to watch. And so I like to spread things out. I like to spread out painting projects with just interesting things, like when I did the 1997 price list video. That was an easier video for me to make, in terms of it was something that was totally different. It was me taking stats and data, analyzing it, making a spreadsheet, which is very, very different from taking a model and choosing a color scheme and painting it and documenting the process. So by mixing things up, I think it really helps not to burn out when you're doing a creative thing for your job. Would you recommend doing something like YouTube if someone is passionate about what they make? 100% yes. The only thing you need to bear in mind is you also need to be passionate about making videos. Really, that is what I consider myself to be. I'm a video maker, essentially. The hobbying is just what I make videos of. The thing I really, really enjoy doing is making videos and editing the videos and putting them together and putting them out. That's the kind of the quirky side of my creative process. I really like creating the thing in the editor. It doesn't really matter what it's about. I'll happily make videos about other things as well, which I've done on the channel. But yeah, give it a go. I mean, it might be something you really, really love doing. So try it out, see if you like it. Any fun anecdotes of trying to explain to others what your job is now? Since it's become my job, I haven't really spoken to very many people outside of the hobby. It's a bit of a strange one to answer. I'd just say I make videos, I'm a video maker. In a way that sounds more legit, and then if people ask if they're interested, I'll let them know what and in what capacity, but YouTuber, I don't like the way that sounds. What's your process for making a video? It's a little bit tricky because every video is slightly different, but generally I have an idea. It might not even be an idea I've written down. Quite often I'll change week to week what I think I'm going to do next. But basically, I do the thing that I'm going to do and I film it. And then I try and think about an interesting way to present that, because just showing you how to paint something or how to make a particular thing isn't necessarily very compelling watching. I try to find an angle where it'll make it more interesting for a viewer who isn't necessarily even interested in Warhammer. So, for example, that Eldar Farseer that I painted it up before I even had the conception of asking a professional miniature painter / judge to judge the quality of my paint job. But that's the thing that makes that video interesting, having the dynamic of it being judged by a professional. That is what elevates it to something that maybe someone who isn't interested in the hobby would also watch. What collaboration video and or project are you most proud of, and why? I think probably most proud of the Dana Howell video I did recently. I painted something that was totally not in my style, but I really enjoyed the process, and I also really enjoyed seeing her Grimdark Space Marines. That was a fantastic collaboration. I'm really glad I did that. As a fellow creator, how do you decide what your next project is? I kind of don't really. I'm very much flying by the seat of my pants nearly all the time. I tend to make videos that I feel interested in at the time and I feel like might do well in terms of people watching them. But then that is also maybe to the channel's detriment, because I leave things and I procrastinate and I kind of kick things into the long grass that I'm not really that keen on doing or I don't think will be watched very much. So honestly, I don't really have a method. It's just kind of what I feel like at the time. How often do you paint or assemble minis or projects off camera? Not really as often as you think. I pretty much do all of my hobbying on camera, and that's actually the thing I think that is the driving force behind the Warhammer creativity on Midwinter Minis, in that I have a lot of people kind of waiting and expecting to see stuff, and that kind of motivates me and keeps me going. I do little experiments from time to time off camera just to see if things are going to work, or just practice color schemes, but sort of nothing dramatic. Do you think faction mechanics and strengths are distinct enough, and is there a mechanic niche that isn't currently being filled? I'll tell you what I think is missing at the moment is a faction that is just basic. Basic, easy faction. Unfortunately, I'm kind of feeling that 9th edition Warhammer 40,000 disparity of the rules and the amount of rules that are very different between all the factions. It's kind of ruining the game very slightly. Not entirely, but it makes it less fun for me, and I'm sure it makes it a lot harder for new players to get into it. What I would really, really like to see is a basic faction where there are almost no special rules. Maybe they are just kind of quite good as their base stats, and that's that. And they're basically an army you play if you want to kind of learn the game, and are sort of protected from all of the rules updates and additions in different books. Maybe, just maybe, if Games Workshop were to bring squats back, that would be quite a good avenue to pursue with them. Very simple, very strong, good at shooting, good at fighting, nice armor, slow. There's a lot you could do with that. That would be quite fun to play. Just an idea. And kind of following on from that, a question generally about 9th edition Warhammer 40k and whether or not having all of the unique rules for different characters, factions, armies, weapons and stratagems is a little bit too much, and whether or not that actually improves the gameplay experience. And like I said, I kind of don't think it does. I would much prefer to see not a simplified version of Warhammer 40,000, but maybe a casual version of Warhammer 40,000 and leave the min-maxing to tournaments where it belongs. I would have absolutely loved 9th edition to come with a rule book that included basic rules for everything in the game, kind of like the 2nd edition book did, that essentially allows anyone who buys that box to play the game, no matter what models you have. And then you could build on that maybe with a tournament rulebook and tournament codices with all of the really overly wordy descriptions that kind of make sure everything is in its place rules-wise. But yeah, I think having paragraphs of text describing a special rule and having to learn 10, 20, 30 special rules just for your army, that's probably quite off-putting for learners. Are you going to give fans the opportunity to challenge you to a 500-point game? I would absolutely love that. The only reason I kind of haven't done that is because as soon as our battle reports started getting a little bit popular, boom, coronavirus lockdown. So it kind of put a big cork in that idea. But yeah, it's definitely something I'd like to try out in the future. Maybe have a little challenge series or something. What army do you see as your main faction? Orcs, of course. You don't even need to ask that question. I have also collected Chaos Space Marines, Imperial Guard. Blood Angels was my first army. I have a reasonable amount of Necrons. Yeah, I have a few sort of smaller armies on the go as well, but Orcs are my main army. I think currently I have about 7,000 or 8,000 points worth of Orcs. What is your least favourite Warhammer army? I'm gonna unfortunately have to say Primaris Space Marines. They don't do it for me. There's something aesthetically about them that just doesn't fill me with joy. And I have no burning passion to paint a lot of them. I mean, I'll do a few of them, for sure, but I'm just not really interested. And the concept of Primaris Space Marines, I'm not that interested in the lore of Warhammer 40,000. I mean, I love it, but I don't read all the books or anything. I feel like the kind of retconning of Space Marine size was pointless. They could have just introduced a slightly better scaled human size model for the Imperial Guard and basically say, we made the mistake with Cadians or, Catachans back then. We made them a little bit too big. Here's the new size of humans, and it makes sense for the Space Marines. I'm going to say there's a lot more Space Marines out there than Imperial Guard. Probably would have been an easier thing to integrate, but oh well, never mind. When will you join the greater good? Well, I'm going to have to paint up the Start Collecting Tau set, so soon, probably. If I could add something to Warhammer, what would it be? Civilians. I realise there's an ethical problem with adding non-combatants to a wargame. I just think there is so much going on in all of these settings, but you never actually see what people are trying to save or who armies are trying to massacre. For me, it would add another level of depth and intensity to games. It'd be really interesting to kind of create narratives and just have fun with. What are your thoughts on Forge World minis, and do you think they're good value or totally overpriced? That is a difficult question. Whether things are overpriced or correctly priced really sort of depends on your conception of money and value. If it brings you happiness, it might seem very, very affordable. But if you look at it as like 5 little toys for 50 quid, maybe that's not acceptable. But I don't honestly have very strong opinions one way or the other. I haven't really had much experience with genuine Forge World stuff. I have had a few models that are Forge World that I picked up on eBay. I definitely don't think they're legitimate Forge World though. I think they are made somewhere else. But I've had a very kind patron send me a box of Forge World stuff, which I'm going to make and paint to get a bit of experience for when I tackle the Titan, which has just arrived. And the size of the boxes, it's very, very intimidating. So, oh man. What is your favourite piece of lore or background from 40k? One thing I do quite like is just the generic Space Marine lore of basically they're not humans anymore, they are transhuman, and they've, for better or for worse, had to leave behind human traits to serve as protectors of humanity. That's just a classic literary or storytelling element. It's nothing special, but I think in the context of the universe of Warhammer 40,000, it works quite well. I still don't really like Space Marines though, don't get me wrong. If you had control of Games Workshop for a day, what's the number one thing you would do? As I mentioned in a previous video, the Why is Warhammer So Popular video, I would start an in-store recycling scheme where you bring in your sprues and you get, in return, a flat terrain tile with a little texture pressed into it made from recycled sprues. I think that would work really well. Also, dropper bottles. Get rid of those paint pots. I know that's technically two things, but bear with me. How many armies do you have at this point? How big are they? Well, I've kind of mentioned what they are, but I currently have about 2,000 points of Chaos Space Marines, 7,000 points of Orcs, and maybe about 3,000 or 4,000 points of Necrons, but not all of the Necrons are painted, so I do feel a bit guilty about that. But also, essentially, I'm going to have all of the start collecting boxes as well, so hey, quite a lot of armies. What is your favourite Space Marine chapter, and why is it Dark Angels? That is a very good question. It is split, to be honest, between Dark Angels and Blood Angels. Maybe I just like angels. Honestly though, it's the colour schemes. As I said, I'm not really kind of that interested in the lore, but the colour schemes for Blood Angels, specifically the retro style Blood Angels and Dark Angels, for me, they look like cool Space Marines. I mean, I think all of the kind of main original colour schemes of the Space Marine chapters look pretty cool. I really like Imperial Fists. I like Ultramarines. They look quite cool. Blue and yellow or gold is a classic colour combination and it looks good. It's fun to paint. But yeah, Dark Angels, sure. What would you prefer for 40k? Some new Xenos factions or a refresh of the Xenos Rangers that currently have really old models? That's kind of a tricky one. I don't think that refreshing a range is always 100% beneficial. The Eldar models that are really, really old haven't been updated for a reason, and I think that reason is because they're really, really good and they look great. I mean, sure, it'd be fun to have slightly better models that could be posed slightly more dynamically. I know the Tau Crisis Suit kits basically had that done. There's been several iterations of those from metal to plastic and then to the new, more dynamically posable plastic models. And it maybe seems a little bit unfair that those models have had 3 iterations and several Eldar models have only ever had 1, and they're almost 30 years old. But as I said, they're pretty good. I would really, really like to see kind of more interesting, varied, and not necessarily whole armies, maybe just kind of small alien subcultures and sub-races that might flesh out a kill team, for example. Struggle to see a reality where Games Workshop will actually make that happen, because I don't really see them doing that if they can't integrate it somehow into a codex to kind of maximize their profit potential from investing time into new models and new concepts. If you and Penny were a Warhammer model, what would you both be? I've got a feeling Penny would want to be a Tau broadside, all snuggled up in the fetal position in a giant killing robot suit. That sounds like her down to the ground. I would like to be probably a Nurgling. They always just seem like they're having so much fun and having cool little frolics and doing fun things. Why not? Do I have any significant Imperium armies that I haven't shown off yet? No, not really. Sorry. Do you shop Games Workshop in-store or online? I browse online all the time, but no, I actually shop in-store. The Colchester Games Workshop is very good. Simon is a great manager. However, I did just make my largest ever Games Workshop purchase online, which is for the Warlord Titan, so probably online is where my money goes, actually. What size or sizes of Winsor & Newton brushes do you recommend? I'm only using a size 2. I think for what I do, anything smaller than a size 2 is kind of pointless. It maybe shows the kind of quality of paint I'm doing, but yeah, size 2 I think is a good all-rounder size. How do you go about picking colours for a custom palette? Any tips for aspiring painters? Just take influence from as many places as you can, really, whether it's cool pictures that you already like or other people's colour schemes or, you know, things in nature. There are so many different amazing colour combinations that work on loads of different levels. You don't always have to follow guidelines that are set out. You can just make up your own. If you like it, that is what is important, really. You're painting for yourself. How many paintbrushes have you ruined over the years? I mostly use synthetic brushes, and they do have a limited life. I'm not pretending that they last forever. You can maintain them and you can get good results with them. In the time I've been making videos for Midwinter Minis, I've probably rendered 10 brushes unusable. In the time this channel's been up and running, I've painted a lot more models than I ever did beforehand, so I've probably only destroyed that many brushes again on top of that before this, so maybe about 20. That's a reasonable estimate. If you had to stick with just one brand of paints, what would it be? It has to be Vallejo. I think on the whole, their range is absolutely what I'm looking for in miniature paints. The right consistency, really nice variety of colours, and they just work the way I expect them to. And yes, I realise I say Vallejo wrong all the time and it's actually Vallejo, but I've just said it for so long I can't not say it that way. I'm sorry. What was the most difficult or least fun mini to paint? I'm still going with the Negavolt cultists from Blackstone Fortress. They're just so fiddly, and the weird angles you have to get your brush in to actually paint specific parts. It's just very, very awkward. I did not have fun painting those, but they look okay in the end. But yeah, 0 out of 10 painting experience. What is your favourite type of mini to paint? I think it's got to be orc vehicles. I really love how you can kind of paint them essentially however you want. They're supposed to be painted by orcs. So you can go crazy with the paint jobs, you can go crazy with the weathering, you can basically do whatever you like, and that experience for me is really fun and freeing. Have you ever tried non-metal metallic painting? I have tried it. I've done little bits and bobs. I actually made a little guest video for Black Magic Craft a few months ago in which I painted a Chaos Cultist with a non-metallic metal knife. And it looked okay. I prefer true metallic metal. I prefer the paint with the mica powder in to make it actually look shiny. Non-metallic metal looks really good in photos and static images, but when you actually have it in your hands and you're playing a game with it, it just kind of loses the luster a little bit. At least I think so. I just prefer metallic shiny things. If you could only use one brush size for the rest of your life, a 000 or a size 6, I would obviously go for the size 6. I use a size 6 or a 7 for most of my base coating anyway. Size 2s are generally the lowest I go to, so a 000 would be entirely useless for me. Size 6. What do I do when I get bored with a figure, and do I have a shelf full of shame? I have more than a shelf full of shame. I have pretty much a whole room full of shame. I don't really give myself room to get bored with a miniature, because pretty much everything you see on Midwinter Minis is what I'm doing in my hobby, so there's definitely a pressure there for me to get things done and to do it. And even if I'm not happy with it, just finish it, do it, make the video and get it out. Even though, you know, you're not necessarily going to be putting things out on your own YouTube channel, having some sort of pressure, even from friends or from other people in the hobby, kind of spurring you on to complete something, it kind of does help, that element of pressure, so give it a go. What content do you usually have on in the background when hobby painting? I always have something on, but I'm not that picky about what it is. It's either an audiobook or some music, preferably kind of instrumental stuff if I'm working, or YouTube videos. I'm not really that fussy. Although, now that I think about it, I never watch films and never watch TV series. I very, very rarely watch TV anymore anyway, but films I do enjoy still, but I don't watch them while I'm painting. Could you give me some tips on highlighting orcs? Yellow. I really like to kind of bump up the vibrancy of orc skin, so I start off with quite a neutral green. It's a intermediate green by Vallejo usually, and then I basically just add progressively more yellow to that and kind of blend in the highlights. But then I use a brown wash rather than a green wash. I use a brown wash to kind of do the recess shading on the muscles, and I think that kind of adds a little bit more of a dimension than using a green wash and just having everything the same color. Brown is quite a good way to recess shade most colors, adds a little bit more visual interest. That's what I think. Any advice for cheap and effective ways of experimenting with colors and ideas? I kind of covered this in one of my previous videos, but just getting really cheap toys, like cheap little dinosaur toys for kids, or, you know, little action figures, and just prime them and paint them and just play around, because often they have quite cool textures on them sort of pressed into them anyway, and you can just experiment with color schemes and experiment with different techniques and see if you like it, and then apply it to your smaller, much more expensive miniatures. What one paint job are you most proud of? It has to be the Eldar Fireseer that I painted up recently. I spent an awful lot of time on it, and I tried some things that I don't usually do, and I was really happy with how it turned out. How to get back into the mood to paint when the desire is gone? Again, just don't. Give yourself room to breathe, give yourself some time off. Don't make painting feel like a chore. It should be an enjoyable, fun experience, a nice, relaxing pastime, in my opinion. So just have a break and don't feel guilty about it, and you'll come back to it recharged, refreshed, and ready to paint some more. If that's what you want to do. And maybe you've gone off it, and that's okay as well. There's so many other things to do and enjoy in the hobby. Do I varnish my models? No, really, not that often. I occasionally varnish my terrain if I think it's going to get a lot of use, or if it's kind of has texture effects on it, but no, not models really. Sorry. Are there any big fancy hobby tools that you've bought and never really used? No, actually. I'm pretty frugal with my hobby purchases, which is why I still use these little cups and blue tack as a little painting handle. My only really big hobby purchases have been stuff like my airbrush and compressor, which I really use whenever I can and I really enjoy it, and my paint shaker, which I use all the time now. I don't know how I live without it, to be honest. It's a real luxury, but yeah, it's good. I like it. So no is the answer to that question. Do you play Blood Bowl, and if not, why? Yeah, I mean, no, but I did have my first ever game recently with Ant, semi-recently, and I enjoyed myself, actually. It was quite fun. In my mind, I never do things by half measures, so if I enjoy something a bit, I'm like, oh man, I could make a Soul Stadium, and I could, make a whole pitch and make cool videos on that and do every team. But, sometimes I get a bit carried away, so it's maybe good that I just had a little experience, and maybe things will develop from there. Do you, or will you do anything with Warhammer Fantasy, not Age of Sigmar? Definitely. I recently picked up the first ever Warhammer Fantasy box set, so I really want to do a retro unboxing on that. I know a few other people have done that already, but I think because I'm not really experienced in Warhammer Fantasy at all, it'll be quite interesting seeing it with totally new eyes, essentially. I don't really know anything about it. I know that it's very significant, but yeah, I'm looking forward to covering that. Will you paint something from Age of Sigmar? Yeah, sure. There's no real reason why I haven't already. It's just I'm more interested in Warhammer 40,000, and Midwinter Minis really is sort of following my hobby, my personal hobby, and I'm sharing it with everyone. And I'm not really involved in Age of Sigmar at the moment, but that's not to say that won't change. Would you ever think about continuing the start collecting battles with Age of Sigmar boxes? Realistically, I have to say probably not. I've never played a game of Age of Sigmar, and that's not to say I won't, ever, but to do something on camera and put it out to tens, hundreds of thousands of people, I think you kind of need to know what you're doing, or at least share an honest experience. So if I have no idea what I'm doing, I would need to very much show that I have no idea what I'm doing. Maybe I could film something where I'm learning it and sort of share that experience, but again, sort of editing that into something that is entertaining and watchable might be tricky. If you were to start an Age of Sigmar army, which would it be if it is an Oryx? Well, I don't know the specific armies or what's included in specific armies, but I really, really like the Beastmen models, and I really, really like Skinks, and I really like the Giants. So if there's any way I could play with Beastmen, Skinks, and Giants together in one army, that would be the army I play. What was your favourite game when you were a kid, and why was it Hero Quest? Unbelievably, I've never actually... No, I've played Hero Quest once, a very long time ago, but I didn't own it. I feel like I was maybe just a tiny bit too young to be the right age that it was aimed at when it came out, and we didn't have it, so I never played it. But I have the old version now, so yeah, I'm really looking forward to opening it up and having a look and painting the models and maybe giving it a game. Did you ever collect or paint non-Warhammer minis? The only thing I really had a collection of that wasn't Warhammer minis was Guyver models. I had about 4 or 5 of the old Max Factory late 80s, early 90s vinyl models. And they were really interesting to make and paint. They were like 1/6 scale, so they were about, 12 inches high. I wish I knew where they were, but they're gone, like many of the things I used to have. Have you ever considered getting into 3D printing, like designing and printing your own miniatures? For sure, I would absolutely love to do that. Essentially, those two things are another 2 hobbies, and it's already quite a challenge to make Warhammer 40,000 painting and playing entertainment for people to watch, and actually still have a hobby to enjoy to myself. So I probably don't really have the time to invest in 3D printing or designing. It's something I'd love to do, and I feel like I might be quite good at it if I tried, but yeah, not right now. Maybe in the future. What was your most recent D&D character, if you have one, and if not, what would you choose? I've never ever played D&D, and I'm really not familiar with the characters or the kind of races or classifications or anything. I would definitely like to learn, like to play one day, but yeah, D&D is just something that has totally passed me by, unfortunately. Which non-Games Workshop figures do you like the most, if any? I really like the style and design of Anvil Industries stuff. Their Sisters of Battle equivalent, I think, look great. to be honest. For me, the aesthetic just works really, really well. I also like Puppets War bits. The bits are just so cool. They have so many different heads and varieties of stuff. It's like a kitbasher's dream. You can just make the model you want to make. And Cromlech also have a very special place in my heart just because their orc models are so amazing. And I've got a few of them and I'm really happy with them. What is your favourite non-Games Workshop game? It has to be Pandemic at the moment. Really, really fun. Penny and I have been playing it semi-regularly. It's also a game that Penny can play without feeling like she wants to kill everyone, because you're actually playing together and helping each other rather than competing against each other, which she really doesn't enjoy. So yeah, Pandemic. It's very fun. You should try it. Do you want to try non-Games Workshop games? Definitely. I mean, I just like playing games. I like playing board games. And I know Games Workshop isn't the be-all and end-all. And there are quite a few games I want to try out, maybe in the new year. I want to dip my toe into historicals. I know a lot of people are kind of very keen on me trying that out and trying the techniques used in painting and playing. So yeah, that could be quite interesting. What do you think is your favourite non-Games Workshop model? I don't really feel like I know enough about other manufacturers' models. My hobbying very much sort of centers around Games Workshop stuff, not necessarily the company, but I just really like their models. I like the setting. However, having said that, I do really like the Dad's Army miniatures from Bolt Action. I think that's just genius. What an amazing crossover. I definitely want to get them and paint them on the channel at some point. Do you have much experience with tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, etc.? Your Grimdark voice would be excellent for being the GM. I think if I did my Grimdark voice for that long to GM a whole game, I would destroy my throat. It's very much a short bursts kind of thing. Is there a particular sci-fi or fantasy film that doesn't yet have miniatures that you would really like to see miniatures for? I know I go on about this all the time, but I would really like Guyver miniatures. The character designs and the monster designs are really, really cool. If you haven't seen what I'm talking about, go and look them up, because I think they're kind of among the coolest sci-fi anime creatures and monsters and characters that have ever been designed. I just think they look amazing. I'm very, very biased because I thought it was cool when I was younger, and obviously I still think it's cool. But I would really like maybe, I don't know, 28mm scale models that you could maybe use in tabletop wargaming. That would be pretty badass. What's your favourite non-hobby shop for terrain? That is a really, really good question. I really like hardware stores like B&Q or Wix or Homebase. Those are obviously UK brands. Every single time I go in there, I'm just like, oh wow, you could make some really cool industrial terrain with that. And Penny's like, stop looking at the plastic pipes. Come on, we need to buy some things. How do you deal with your color blindness, and how do you pick colors? I feel like I don't really deal with it. I can see colors. I just, reds and greens sort of blur into each other at the extreme edges, and they kind of look a bit browny, grey and dull. And really bright orange lights tend to look green, and vice versa. In terms of picking colours, I just pick what I think looks good. Luckily, I have my girlfriend Penny on hand, who has fully functioning eyeballs, and she's very quick to tell me when things don't work. So as a team, I think we work well together. There's another question which is kind of an extension to that one, which is basically what recommendations do I have for people who also suffer from colour blindness? And really, my main recommendation is just to find someone who has eyes you trust, who maybe you can bounce ideas and colour schemes off and just kind of check as you go. It doesn't have to be anyone who's interested in Warhammer. It can just be, you know, a friend just occasionally saying, do these colours work, or is this a weird mix, or is that pink and I just can't see it, which is often my problem. I think it's just very reassuring to have somebody else, you know, kind of confirm what you think, or maybe alert you to mistakes you're making. Have I ever used a pair of color blindness correcting glasses? No. I think there's a company called Enchroma that make glasses that kind of distort colors to make them appear more like they would to a regular sighted person, but I'd be very interested to try them, but no, I never have. Who or what got you into miniature painting, and a follow-up of how did you learn to paint minis? Honestly, it's really just friends at school. When I was like 9 or 10 or 11, there were a few people around me that had Warhammer miniatures and Warhammer models, and it just sort of fueled my fire to be involved in that, really. I had a big break between the ages of about 15 or 16 and 27, 28, where I did nothing to do with the hobby. But yeah, I'm glad to be back. How did I learn to paint models? It's kind of a mix, really. I did get a few tips and tricks from the old White Dwarfs, which was, again, the only way you could really get direct communication from Games Workshop and advice from Games Workshop back in the day. This is like the mid-90s, so no web presence for them. And just the sort of general artistic knowledge that I had learnt from my parents teaching me, and also that I was learning at school, just kind of combined into a useful skill for the hobby. What was the first ever mini you painted? I'm not 100% sure, but it's either going to be the 2nd edition starter set Space Marine with bolt gun, or the 2nd edition of Space Hulk Terminator. That might have been the first model I painted. And what a model, they still look so cool in my opinion. Do you have any recommendations for resources for new players? I think YouTube is an amazing resource for new players, whether it's for painting or for tactics. There's channels literally dedicated to all of those things. One resource that I do find quite useful, although I don't really like it that much, is 1D4chan, the website. It has really useful tactics and it has really interesting articles, but it does read like it was written by a very edgy and angry 14-year-old. So yeah, take that as you will. How do you decide which GW box games to buy? I think I have to be genuinely interested in having both sides of the armies. I can't just be interested in one. However, if I have somebody who is really interested in one of the armies, we might do a little split box thing. I definitely did that with Ant with Indomitus, for example. And that is also why I have far too many Necrons at the moment, because we didn't just buy one box. Was Penny initially a Warhammer nerd? No, absolutely not. She was actually quite disappointed when I started getting back into the hobby, but you know, she's dealt with it very well. How did you and Penny meet? About 8 or 9 years ago, maybe 8, we met at a cash point, which is an ATM for our American viewers. We were going to the same venue, and actually we were supposed to meet up because one of Penny's bandmates had organised a meeting with me where I was going to discuss potentially recording their new EP, which we did, and that's kind of how we met. And then, you know, a year later, sort of things progressed from there. Can we see Penny as some sort of subscriber goal? It's not really up to me, to be honest. I've left everything open to Penny. She can be here and on camera if she wants to be. There's no kind of secret reason why she isn't. And if you go on our Instagram, you can see her anyway. The thing that might be a bit awkward is that she's going to be a working doctor and she's going to be a general practitioner. So she's going to be seeing a lot of different people in a particular area. And at this point where I'm walking down the street and some people recognize me, which is very, very weird, it might be even weirder if one of those people has to go in to a doctor's surgery for a very private and embarrassing problem, and they have somebody who they know and recognize doing the examination. That might be weird. How are you and Penny doing at this trying time? I wish the best for both of you. That's very, very kind. We're doing okay. We're doing fine. My life, fortunately, hasn't really changed that much because I'm a bit of a hermit anyway. I stay indoors. I do indoor activities. I'm probably actually out and about more often now because we have a dog, and you know, walkies is always a fun time. It's obviously very, very busy at the moment for Penny. She has to wear, you know, full-on protective gear when she's seeing patients, but yeah, doing okay. We're getting on well. Don't worry about us too much. It's very kind of you that we're in your thoughts. When are you finally going to drag Penny into the hobby full-time? Probably never, is the honest answer. She likes getting involved from time to time, but you know, she's got a proper job. She's a doctor, and I think the dynamic of having her kind of just drop in for occasional quips and to do a little bit of narration and to, you know, play games when there's no one else around, begrudgingly, it kind of works really well for the channel. So, you know, happy to continue that on. But I think if I did drag her in, she would be pretty miserable. Would you thank Penny from us for her key working this year? Consider it done. How do you balance your hobby time and work time with Penny time? I mean, that is a notoriously difficult thing in all relationships. Don't think that I'm perfect. I'm not perfect at all, and I quite often spend far too long way into the evenings painting and editing videos. It is just really important though to just communicate well and often, and just don't let things fester, and make sure you kind of dedicate a bit of time to the people you love, and just do the odd thing now and then to make them feel special. It's not like rocket science, it's just being nice. When are you going to make Penny paint something? She's already painted something on the channel, a lovely little grav gun, but she's actually a very good painter. She just doesn't have the time or inclination to do it at the moment. But maybe we can get her to paint something on the channel at some point in the future. Has Penny ever seen a patient where Nurgle's rot would be an appropriate description? Definitely, yes. From some of the stories she's told me, quite horrific stories that probably, for patient confidentiality, I shouldn't share here, but yeah, gross. Is Henry Cavill the VIP final round of the Start Collecting tournament? No. But there is a VIP for the final round of the Start Collecting tournament. But it's not Henry. Quite a nebulous question here. What are your plans for Midwinter Minis? My plan is to not have any plans. I am very happy just making the content that I like to make. And so long as there is an audience there who appreciate that, I'm happy. I don't have any kind of financial goals that I want to achieve. I don't have any kind of like video topics that I specifically want to cover. I just want to enjoy myself and share my enjoyment of my hobby with other people. Apart from painting the Titan, what's the next thing you'll be doing in the hobby to push yourself outside your comfort zone? I always try to do something that pushes me outside my comfort zone, even if it's in a video that is on something I'm very comfortable with. So even in something like the 1990s paint set unboxing video, I didn't have any transfers for the Ultramarine, so I freehanded the Ultramarine symbols on the pauldrons. And yeah, that's a challenge because I don't think I've ever done that on camera before. And doing something when it's just for your own pleasure with no one watching, you probably have a steadier hand and can do it at a more relaxed pace. When you're trying to do it and film it at the same time, and you know tens or hundreds of thousands of people are going to watch you do it, kind of raises the bar slightly. To really push me outside my comfort zone though, I've got quite a few cool challenge ideas for the year ahead, so yeah, I hope you enjoy those when they happen. Once the world is safer and we're allowed to safely mix in larger groups again, what do you reckon to a Midwinter Minis con somewhere in the UK? I would 100% be up for that, definitely. I'm actually really looking forward to when things start getting a little bit more back to normal. I think it's going to be a little bit strange though, because the last time I visited Warhammer World at the end of 2019, a few people came up to me, maybe 5 or 6, and asked, are you Guy from Midwinter Minis? And I was like, yeah. I thought that was very, very cool and very strange and kind of weird. And now, even though there's hardly anyone out, I've been stopped in the street 3 or 4 times in the last couple of months. That takes a little bit of time to get your head around and feels quite strange, but I would definitely be up for having like a fan event either around another event or just on its own. Why not? But I'm just a normal person. I'm not that interesting. Apart from the YouTube channels you collaborate with, do you watch any other Warhammer related creators on YouTube? And will you be doing more collaborations in the future with any new channels? I watch most Warhammer channels. I kind of flip between them to kind of keep abreast of the situation and what other content creators are doing and making. I don't want to just accidentally make a video that's exactly the same as someone else's. And also like to learn a few of the stories and a little bit of the lore. But yeah, I've got a few cool collaborations in the pipeline. You shall see. Have you ever considered doing some streaming at times, either chatting, painting, or even gaming? I did a little test stream playing FTL about a year ago now. I just always end up putting it off because I've got a video to make. Any plans to do more kit bashing tutorials? Definitely. I love kit bashing. I've got a few cool ideas of things I'd like to try out in the future. I don't want to kind of ruin any surprises here though, but yeah, kit bashing tutorials and just general tutorials that involve kit bashing in the kind of creation of the models are definitely on the agenda. Once you're done with Blackstone Fortress, one video to go. Will you cover another game as a series, original or even new Hero Quest? I would love to cover Hero Quest. I have ordered it from Zavvi in the UK, so I've got a copy on the way at some point. Who knows when that will turn up. But given the quality of Blackstone Fortress, I'm really looking forward to seeing what Games Workshop put out next. There's so much they could do, whether it's a new version of Space Hulk, or a new version of Space Crusade, or a totally original game like Blackstone Fortress was. I think there's a lot of potential in that Warhammer Quest line. I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do. Have you or Penny ever considered an RPG playing podcast? We have considered making a podcast, but not necessarily about RPGs. It might just be about things that we like. I think to get Penny involved and to actually have something to talk about and to make it a kind of natural flowing conversation we would need to just talk about things that we like, whether that's films or music or, culture or politics or all of those in one. I realized that a lot of people like listening to podcasts of people in the same room who know each other, because the conversation just flows really naturally, and it's a nice kind of thing to listen to and to hear people interact. That's something that we've toyed around the idea of doing, but we haven't sort of committed to anything yet. Where do you see yourself in the channel in 5 years? Even 5 years ago, I wouldn't have imagined the path that my life has taken now, really. So any guess that I would have of the next 5 years is entirely guesswork, and I know will be 100% wrong. But I'm not really that kind of person either. I'm just happy seeing where the wind takes me, to be honest. Any chance of getting a hoodie with the Midwinter Minis logo on it? Maybe. How's that pile of shame looking? Bigger. Titanicus, the small ones, will you do them? Definitely. I really like them when I've seen them in the flesh. I think they look really, really cool. And I also love the little planes, Aeronautica. Man, they look great. I would love to do it. It's just time, and will people watch those videos? Maybe, but sure, I'll give it a go. Have you ever considered doing armies that aren't typically featured on your channel, like Tyranids or Eldar or Tau? Definitely. I mean, I do cover those armies. I try to cover as much as I can, obviously, because I'm just sharing my personal hobby. That is kind of limited. But one of the most appealing things of doing the Start Collecting Deathmatch series was that I would be able to paint all of those factions on the channel. So I'd have a lot of kind of varied content and also have some battle reports. Really hope we can get that going again soon. You've shown us how to paint the Blackstone Fortress miniatures, but will you show us how to play the game? Possibly. I'm not ruling it out. It's just, at the moment, playing any game on camera is kind of tricky. We can't really have people round because we're in lockdown, and I think, honestly, the game is best played when you have other people playing it with you. You can play it on your own. It's better with at least 2 people. Is there a technique, a style, or challenge from another painter you want to try out but haven't yet? Actually, one of my video ideas I'd really like to do is basically try out maybe, a certain number, 5, 10, whatever, other people's tutorials in one video, whether that's terrain making or painting, also as a way to highlight other people's channels that I really enjoy. But I think that'd be quite fun to watch me try and probably fail quite a few of them as well. Are you going to make a collab with Duncan Too Thin Coats Rhodes? I have been speaking to the man, the myth, the legend himself, so hopefully something might happen at some point in the future. Soon, maybe? Will there be a Death by Dice Volume 2, and will it have the Start Collecting Deathmatch tunes? Yes. And yes. In terms of timescale, I'm not too sure when it'll actually happen. The Start Collecting Deathmatch series is kind of paused at the moment because, again, we are under lockdown and I can't have people over to actually play games, very irritatingly. But yeah, hopefully soon. What are some of your greatest musical inspirations? It's a really difficult one because music is kind of the main thing in my life, or at least it was before I started doing this channel. Also, my musical tastes are quite varied. On any given day, I might listen to some jazz, or some black metal, or weird post-rock, or some pop, or some R&B. I really don't have a very strong dislike of any particular style of music. But if you force me to pick an all-time top 5, it would probably have to be something like Pink Floyd, Marilyn Manson, Porcupine Tree, Pop Will Eat Itself, and Nine Inch Nails. Not even in that order. But yeah, they are very important bands to me. Top songs from Guy and Penny's Spotify Rap 2020. Well, the top artists are Rammstein, Frank Sinatra, Tortoise, Beastie Boys, and Boards of Canada, kind of reinforcing what I was saying about having weird eclectic tastes. And the top songs are Dance or Die by Starcadian, Memory Arc by Rival Consoles, Auslander by Rammstein, Monica and Benway by Tortoise. And only one of those songs in the top 5 has lyrics. Very telling that I do a lot of my listening while writing scripts. You shared earlier that you've gone through some weight loss recently. Can you share your journey to inspire others? I need a bit of motivation. Would love to hear your story. Basically, I've been doing the ketogenic diet for about 13 or 14 months now, and in that time I have lost about 40 kilograms, which is almost 100 pounds. It's worked really, really well for me. So if you don't know what the ketogenic diet is, it's eating very, very little or no carbs, high fat, moderate protein diet. Just want to preface this with, I am very much not a doctor. I'm not a dietitian. This has worked for me and everything seems to be okay and I've lost weight. It might not work for a lot of people, and I would definitely consult your doctor before you try something like this, because it does have downsides. But to be honest, I think the weight loss and just being a generally healthier weight balances out those downsides. The problem I used to have is that I was just always hungry. I would eat, 3 big meals a day and snack all the time, and I would just still feel hungry. It's crazy how cutting out carbs just eliminates that entirely. You just feel full, or you just don't get that kind of hunger pang, because even though you feel crappy for the first couple of days, once you kind of get through the intro period, you just stop feeling hungry and your body is processing fat rather than carbohydrates as your main source of energy. I feel good. I've had to buy all new clothes. It's worked for me, and maybe you want to try it, but ask a doctor first. Question for you and Penny: what do you call it, slice or square, and what sauce, if any? We are talking, of course, about lawn sausage here. I call it lawn sausage. I'm really sorry, I don't call it slice or square. I think Penny also calls it lawn sausage. I would definitely go for ketchup and lots of butter. Penny might actually go for brown sauce. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Of course it is. Now, a few people in the previous video where I answered this question suggested that a hot dog is actually a taco, and to them I say, a taco is also a sandwich. What coffee, brand or grind, do you mostly drink? I get my coffee from a company called Pact, and they send it to you in the mail at the frequency that you ask for. Their main selling point is that it's kind of tailored for your tastes, but it's also not made by slaves, which is good. I'd like to enjoy the drink that I like without knowing that the people that made it are living a life of pain and suffering. It costs a couple of quid extra than getting it at the supermarket, but in terms of peace of mind and knowing that I'm helping people, sure. In terms of tastes, I really like dark roasts. I'm very much an espresso drinker rather than a long coffee drinker. What's your favorite coffee bean? Very dark roasted. Any espresso bean is good, and I have been known to just eat them as well. What an animal. Did I ever consider making content for anything other than Warhammer or painting? In the past, I've made a lot of content for music, either in my job or outside of my job. And actually, before I started Midwinter Minis, I was debating whether or not to make a Warhammer themed channel or a gaming themed channel. And I thought the gaming market was kind of saturated at the time. But hey, I'm not ruling that out in the future. Maybe if I run out of Warhammer ideas, I'll make a gaming channel. If you'd gone in the direction of playing video games on YouTube instead of mini painting, what games would you be most excited to cover over the last couple of years? Most of the games I've played over the last couple of years have been crushing disappointments. Games that I expected to be very, very good just weren't enjoyable. The main one being Fallout 4. A huge fan of the Fallout series. Played the first game, played Fallout 3 and New Vegas. Probably put between the 3 of those games maybe 500 hours of gameplay into that series. And Fallout 4 had absolutely no replay value for me. You played as that character. No matter how you interacted with the world, it was just you would get the same story basically, and I'm just not really interested in that at all. It's not necessarily that Fallout 4 was a bad game. It was quite fun to play. It didn't feel like a Fallout game for me. Good game, terrible Fallout game. I get a lot of joy from playing games from the sort of mid-90s to the maybe late noughts. If I did make a gaming channel, I think I would focus on that period and kind of play slightly more retro games, maybe games that people weren't familiar with but are amazing. What video game would you most like to see miniatures from? I think Mech Warrior and Mech Commander Battletech is the perfect combination of all of that, where they have a tabletop game, miniatures and models and rules, and also a video game that basically is the same thing but on the computer. And I think that maybe proves what Games Workshop are maybe a little bit afraid of, I think, is that if you have a very accurate representation of the tabletop game as a video game, then people will stop buying the miniatures. And I think it's just absolutely the other way around. It's just an amazing way of getting people involved. They're much more than likely to get involved in the physical side of things as well. But if you're talking about a video game that doesn't currently have miniatures, maybe something like Deus Ex would translate really well into a kind of a small skirmish game. There's a shortage of Ant on the latest videos. Will you make an effort to restore the bromance and feature him again, or do I need to get worried? You definitely don't need to get worried. We are besties, and we quite often play video games together online. The only problem is we are not currently permitted to mix households because of the lockdown situation in the UK, specifically where we are. So it's unfortunately really difficult to get in the same space and share the hobby together. But that is definitely on the cards, and we can't wait to get back together again and start making videos. Any update on Henry Cavill? It's a question I get asked a lot, and I did say in that challenge video that I would say not a word until either nothing happened or until the battle report went live, and I'm sticking to that. What is your name? Guy. What is your quest? To entertain people and help them paint with a bit more confidence? What is your favorite color? Probably red, even though the colorblindness thing. Red. I like red. When are we getting a Nessa paints video? I don't think she would directly paint a miniature, but there are a few dog miniatures out there, and some for Warhammer 40,000 that might be quite interesting to paint up as her. Now, I don't know if you have already seen this, but if you haven't, you should definitely check it out. But John Ninus made a painting video where he painted his recently deceased dog as a miniature, and I cried at that video more than I've cried at literally any film I've ever seen. I just love dogs so much. They're so... Nah, I can't talk about that because it's going to set me off again. Just go and watch the video. I'll leave a link to it in the description. What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? African or European? What are you getting from Santa Claus? I have absolutely no idea. I'm not a present feeler. I'm not going to sneak a little look at whatever there is. I'm just going to take it as it comes. I've been going to Jersey since I was 10. I'm now 30. Are there any hidden gems I probably have missed? Well, unfortunately, I haven't lived there since 2003. And every time I go back there, so much has changed since I was last there, and certainly so much since I lived there. You're probably as much an expert on Jersey as I am, unfortunately. Just in case anyone is wondering what the hell Jersey is. It's a tiny, tiny little island, just 9 miles by 5, very, very close to France. And that is where I'm from. What is your opinion on the ugly Christmas sweater thing? I own several, so I am very much in support of the ugly Christmas sweater thing. What was the worst job you ever had? Any fun anecdotes from that time? I think the second or third job I had as a student at the tender age of 18 or 19 was working at a Scotland tourist shop on the Royal Mile in Edinburgh. I had fun. I wore a kilt. I sold lots of fun, interesting tat to very interesting people. Although I did have people feeling up my kilt more than once, which really is sexual assault. So that's not cool at all, but it happened, and yeah. Fun anecdote? Not really, but that's the worst job I ever had. Do you have any favourite books or authors? I'm just gonna come out there and say it. I'm not a book person. I've always found that I had other things to do. If I'm a very sort of visual doing things person, and the idea of just kind of sitting there for hours and hours and hours reading a thing, I can't do that. I lose my place, my train of thought goes all over the place, but I really do understand and appreciate the value of books and the value of stories. And that is why I've been using Audible for about a year. This isn't an advert, by the way. Nothing in this video is an advert. I'm just being honest. I've been really enjoying it, having stories read to me while I do other things. And that kind of synergizes with how my brain works and how I do activities. So yeah, I would, if you feel the same way that you just have a million other things you'd rather do than sit down and read a book, Audible is a pretty good thing, and you feel like you've kind of accomplished something by doing nothing, essentially, which is always nice. Would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? I would rather fight one horse-sized duck, because I think there's more tactics involved. 100 duck-sized horses, apart from like running around trying to stomp on them all, that's going to be difficult, but I think one horse-sized duck could be an interesting fight. Essentially, that's a dinosaur. And you also don't specify whether or not I'm allowed a gun. So yeah, I choose one horse-sized duck with a cannon. Do red ones really go faster? Of course. Which of the Chaos Gods is your favourite, and which is your least favourite, and why? My favourite Chaos God is Nurgle, because I like the models, and the aesthetic of them is very forgiving. In terms of least favourite, I think the other three are kind of evens. I think Khorne is fun, but it's like too obvious. Tzeentch has that kind of cool otherworldliness about it. And Slaanesh is fun, but, you know, again, is it a little bit puerile? Maybe. It's still fun, but It's just not really what I'm interested in. Would you rather paint 100 duck-sized horses or 1 horse-sized duck? I think actually this time I would choose 100 duck-sized horses, because at least then, you've got a playable army when you're finished. Like everyone's gangster until you turn up for an apocalypse game with 100 duck-sized horses. What cinema in Essex is best, and why is it the movie star on Canvey? Kind of embarrassingly, I haven't really been to the cinema at all since I moved to Colchester. We did, however, go to the Odeon to see Akira in 4K. Yeah, it was a very enjoyable experience. It was nice seeing it on the big screen. Gibson or Fender? It's got to be Fender, sorry. What was the most unprofessional thing you've seen someone do? At one of the places I previously worked, someone received sexual favors in exchange for giving one of their customers their employee discount. And that is 100 and something Patreon questions answered. I hope you found this entertaining and enlightening. And thank you so much for supporting the channel and watching. If you're still here, you're crazy. You're crazy. Well done. Bye for now.